Last Sunday on Easter, we celebrated what Christians believe is the foundation of our faith, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. While the church takes various forms and its message has different expressions, Christians are pretty well unanimous that the heart of their faith is the resurrection. The New Testament is very clear that if Christ was not raised from the dead, then our faith is in vain. Yet, as long as the resurrection has been celebrated, it has also been doubted. The resurrection of Jesus has been questioned since the day it happened. Now, all four Gospels indicate that the first reactions of the resurrection were disbelief, fear, and confusion. No one in Palestine expected the resurrection. It was such a surprise, even to Jesus' closest followers, even though he had foretold it to them. It caught them so much off guard that they could only feel those negative emotions. Among those reactions, perhaps the best known was that of the disciple Thomas. Thomas holds a prominent place in our common vocabulary with the unflattering title, Doubting Thomas. But I don't think it's fair to call him doubting. Thomas is just asking for evidence, which is not all that unusual or not that unexpected, especially given what all of the apostles had gone through in the last week. Can you imagine, with all the drama and all the excitement, how many rumors are flying around town? Just think of all the people talking and saying this and saying that. Like, who was a follower of Jesus and who wasn't? Was he the king of the Jews or not? Was he really who he said he was? And why did he refuse to tell Pilate who he was? And did you hear that Pilate's wife said to her husband that she had a dream showing that Christ was innocent? Let's just say it's a good thing that there wasn't Twitter or Facebook back then, because there'd be even more rumors with all out-of-context quotes and names of alleged disciples verified by unnamed sources close to them. Times were so tense. Social media or not, the disciples were all hiding in a house behind a locked door. Mary Magdalene told them the week before that she had seen Jesus, but there they sat in hiding, likely because of fear, perhaps to protect themselves from the dangers in town, from what people might say about them, or worse, what the people might do to them. And Jesus shows up and appears before them. But poor Thomas missed it. Thomas wasn't even there. He wasn't there when Jesus miraculously showed up in the room, surprising them all. Thomas didn't get to hear the sound of Jesus' voice. He wasn't at the empty tomb a week earlier like Peter and the beloved disciple. And unlike Mary Magdalene, he didn't hear Jesus call him by name. I always wonder where Thomas was that day when Jesus came to visit the apostles in the house. The gospel doesn't give us any clues, so it's possible he may have just been off somewhere praying or walking around town to find out some information. Or maybe he was tending to some personal matters. Or perhaps, on a lighter note, he had gone to Chick-fil-A to bring some food back for his friends. It makes sense, they must have been hungry. I think it's unfair with the label we've put on this disciple as Doubting Thomas. I think a more appropriate name might be something that maybe was politically correct, like Reasonably Skeptical Thomas, or Appropriately Questioning Thomas. Or if he was out being a good friend getting food for everyone, how about Chick-fil-A Thomas? It sounds better than Doubting Thomas, and everyone loves Chick-fil-A. But whatever the reason, Thomas wasn't there. And so they tell him this fantastic story, and of course Thomas has questions. He is seeking evidence. Thomas wants proof. And every time we read this story, isn't the trick really on us? Because aren't we all really Thomas as well? The gospel tells us that Thomas is also called Didymus, and that translates as twin. But it never says who his twin is. Perhaps we are his twin. Wouldn't we also love some proof that this story is real, that the risen Jesus sees us, speaks to us, cares about us, and is still actively involved in our lives today? We certainly would. And what this story can remind us of is that Jesus shows up. Jesus showed up for Chick-fil-A Thomas, and Jesus will show up for us too. It may not look how we think it's going to look, or it may not sound or feel what we would expect, but Jesus is going to bust through some closed doors into our lives. Jesus is going to appear out of some old tombs, and Jesus is going to burst out of the closed spaces that we've boxed him into. Jesus is going to call our names, and he's going to invite us to come in close and really see, touch, and feel. It's funny that we, as did his disciples, think that we can hide away from Jesus, behind locked doors or in our closed hearts. It's funny that we think we can demand proof from the one who is constantly showing us that he is at work in our lives. Jesus is going to show up, and God is going to overwhelm us with his love. And it's going to be a surprise when it happens. Thomas, once he was convinced that it was Jesus himself who stood in front of him, said, "My Lord and my God." And Jesus said to Thomas, "Have you come to believe because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and have believed." Well, those blessed that Jesus is talking about is all of us. And one more thing. In case I whet your appetite for Chick-fil-A, don't forget they're closed on Sunday.